Commander Natalie Brooks huddled behind her battered sedan, rain pelting the asphalt and turning her uniform jacket sodden. A thin trail of blood ran from a fresh gash at her temple, but cold and focus kept her steady. Under the harsh glare of a nearby street lamp stood three men she once trusted. Deputy Chief Daniel Rhodes, a solidly built man of 52, whose stern expression now betrayed no hesitation. Officer Liam Parker, age 29, whose lips curled into a sneer as he failed to recognize Natalie in her plain clothes. And Officer Mason Lewis, 34, who trained a bright flooding light across her face as though he were aiming to unmask a criminal. In that fleeting moment, Natalie's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the fierce knowledge that her life and career had hinged on trusting these very officers. She had hired them, trained them, believed in their integrity. Now they aimed their weapons at her. She reached quietly into her pocket and activated a discreet recording app on her smartphone, mindful of every subtle detail. They had already humiliated her, tearing at her dignity, hauling her from her vehicle and shaking her down without cause. Worse still, the telltale glint of planted evidence lay hidden in one officer's gloved hand, all because of the color of her skin. The bitter irony was not lost on Natalie, commander of the Maplewood Police Department, decorated in blue and gold, now treated like a mere suspect. As the rain sluiced down in steady sheets, Natalie understood that this night would mark a turning point. Maplewood PD had long been shielded by tradition and privilege. Few dared to speak against those in uniform. But tonight on this rain-slicked street, she vowed that justice finally would stand. It was a quiet but unyielding promise. Every misdeed would be revealed, every abuse of power exposed. Under the dim glow of the lamp and the unrelenting patter of rain, the battered commander prepared to change everything. At 38 years old, Commander Natalie Brooks had already navigated more twists and turns than most officers twice her age. She was once the youngest detective in Stonebridge, known for her tenacity and keen investigative instincts. Later, she led a multi-agency task force for the Department of Justice, cracking down on organized crime across 3 states. Her colleagues praised her attention to detail. Even the most seasoned agents respected her disciplined approach. Yet none of that had prepared her for the quiet, manicured streets of Maplewood. When the council chose her as the next police chief, though the announcement was still 2 weeks away, Natalie decided to spend this interim period observing the department incognito. She drove a modest sedan blended into the everyday scenery of suburban life and took note of every street sign, every alleyway. Maplewood had all the hallmarks of a prosperous town: well-kept lawns, luxury boutiques, and tree-lined avenues. But something lay beneath that polished veneer, an undercurrent of racial tension that the council had quietly acknowledged but never fully addressed. Deputy Chief Daniel Rhodes represented the very heart of that tension. At 52, he was groomed to succeed the retiring chief. Everyone assumed his promotion was a foregone conclusion. But Natalie knew the real story. She had the official appointment letter in her encrypted email, scheduled to be unveiled in a matter of days. Until then, she had to play the unassuming newcomer, listening and watching as Rhodes wielded his influence like a seasoned politician. When blue lights flickered behind her on that rainy evening, Natalie's heart remained remarkably calm. She reminded herself this was just an unofficial internal review, a chance to gather unfiltered intel on her own department. Everything depended on staying composed, gathering evidence, and confirming the depth of the rot within Maplewood PD. What she didn't yet realize was how quickly that line between observer and target would evaporate. The sedan slowed smoothly onto the shoulder, its tires crunching wet pavement. Officer Liam Parker slammed his fist against the driver's side window, then stepped back as his partner, Officer Mason Lewis, appeared beside the passenger door. Lewis's hand hovered over his holstered sidearm. Parker barked license and registration. Natalie Brooks met Parker's glare evenly. "May I ask why I've been stopped, officer?" she said, her voice calm. Parker paid no heed and instead studied her with cold curiosity. Lewis's lips curled into a mocking grin as he trained his flashlight on the car's interior. "Beautiful car, isn't it? You sure you could even afford a vehicle like this?" he sneered. Natalie offered a small, controlled smile. "I bought this 3 years ago," she replied in measured tones. "I work in law enforcement myself." That admission drew a flicker of surprise in Lewis's eyes, something she anticipated. His posture shifted. He straightened and gestured sharply. "Step out of the vehicle." Natalie complied slowly, keeping her hands visible on the steering wheel as she reached for the door handle. No sudden movements, no cause for alarm. Yet the moment her feet touched the pavement, Parker's demeanor changed. In one swift motion, he reached inside and began rifling through the glove compartment, searching without permission. She held her ground. "I do not consent to this search," Natalie stated clearly, invoking rights she knew well. Parker's eyes narrowed. "I smell marijuana," he said, though Natalie's interior showed no sign of contraband. In that instant, Lewis lunged forward, seizing her arm and forcefully yanking her against the hood. A sickening crack echoed in her skull as her temple collided with the cold metal. Warm blood welled immediately from the wound sliding down her cheek. Stunned, Natalie pressed a gloved hand to her head, tasting coppery warmth as she fought to remain upright. Through ringing ears, she watched Parker and Lewis exchange satisfied smirks. Two officers convinced they had found another criminal. Yet in their arrogance, they had no inkling that Natalie Brooks was no ordinary driver. She had a plan of her own. Officer Lewis's grip was merciless as he yanked Natalie's arms behind her back. "Hands behind your back," he snarled, snapping the handcuffs with more force than necessary. A sharp sting flared across her wrists as the metal bit into her skin. Parker's voice cut through the rain-damp night air. "Resist and we'll find something in your car every time." His tone was triumphant, as though he believed they already had all the proof they needed. Natalie pressed on, refusing to let her panic show. Under the cover of her damp sleeve, she had activated the emergency recording on her smartphone. Every word, every sneer was being captured in the device's memory. Lewis and Parker then turned their attention back to the sedan. Parker rummaged through the glove compartment, with theatrics flinging open the center console. In a practiced move, he produced a small, clear bag of white powder, the evidence he and Lewis had planted moments earlier. Holding it aloft, he gloated, "See? She's in the drug trade." Natalie's breath stayed steady. She remained still, though every second felt like an eternity. Inwardly, she cataloged each detail: Parker's badge number emblazoned on his chest, Lewis's gloved fingers that had never once checked for warrants, the way his flashlight was aimed away from proper protocol. She noted how Lewis's body camera had been turned away at the moment they began planting evidence, and how Parker, disdain dripping from his voice, mocked her with false accusations. Across the street, a small group of neighbors had gathered beneath awnings, their phones raised to record. At least there were witnesses. In that moment, Natalie knew she was not alone. These bystanders would hold a record of what truly transpired. As Parker held the falsified bag before him, Natalie's resolve strengthened. This night would not go unchallenged. When the time came, every word, every action would serve as a testament to the truth. As Officer Parker produced a laminated paper and began reading the contents aloud, Natalie waited for the precise moment to activate her emergency recording. She had anticipated this move. In her previous training, she learned to remain still until the evidence against her was fully staged. With a slight tilt of her wrist, she engaged a hidden feature on her smartphone, recording from a concealed microphone. Lewis stood by the driver's door, methodically hiding a small plastic bag of white powder under the seat cushion. Across the hood, Parker extracted a second identical bag and tucked it behind the center console. He shot a glance at Lewis and whispered, "No one will doubt us." Who would believe an FBI agent? Natalie's heart clenched. They suspected something significant. She had overheard earlier dispatch chatter describing her as a suspicious subject, but she had not yet revealed her credentials. In that moment, Natalie resolved to preserve each word as evidence for when the truth came to light. Parker leaned toward his radio. "Requesting backup at mile marker 42, possible narcotics involvement," he announced. The officers responded with canned professionalism, as if reading from a playbook, their tone devoid of doubt or hesitation. Meanwhile, Lewis hit a button on his belt-mounted recorder. His body camera's light flickered red, then died. Natalie had taken note before the stop his camera had been disabled. She calmly watched them continue their charade, cataloging each infraction, the warrantless search, the planted evidence, the deference to their own convenience over any real procedure. A handful of neighbors lingered beyond the street lights' glow, their phones recording every move. Their presence gave Natalie quiet assurance. As the rain intensified, Natalie decided to remain silent. She would not protest until she had met with the proper authorities, until her identity and her recordings could dismantle this entire charade. In the quiet hum of the storm, she suffused herself with patience, knowing a single moment of revelation would shift the balance of power in Maplewood PD forever. Officer Parker spoke into his shoulder mic, calling for backup. In moments, two more patrol cars pulled up, tires squealing across the wet pavement. From the second vehicle emerged Officer Ryan Caldwell, 38 years old, exuding an air of authority that made each footstep seem like a command. He paused at the hood of Natalie's sedan and allowed a smug grin to cross his face. "How do you want this?" he drawled. "The easy way or the hard way?" Natalie drew in a steady breath. She placed her hands visibly on the hood and responded, "I'll cooperate." As she opened the door, Caldwell moved faster than she expected. In one brutal motion, he spun her around, grabbed her wrists, and yanked them behind her back with unnecessary force. Her elbows slammed into the metal, and she felt her bones protest. "Hands behind your head," he ordered, his voice echoing in the damp night air. Without hesitation, Parker leaned in close, voice low and harsh. "Ladies like you always carry your own weapons." It was a calculated insult meant to intimidate. Caldwell's gaze inched higher, his tone dropping. "This isn't Nashville, sweetie. Here you learn your lesson." Natalie's temple throbbed from the earlier blow, but she said nothing. Instead, she met Caldwell's eyes and through the blur of rain, discreetly tapped her phone to continue the hidden recording. Caldwell's knuckles whitened as he tightened the cuffs. Natalie felt the cold bite of steel against her skin. She cataloged every detail in her mind, the slight twitch of Caldwell's fingers that betrayed impatience, Parker's sneering posture, and the sloppy manner in which Lewis fumbled with the evidence bags. Each infraction was being documented, camera-off evidence, planted racial taunts, whispered under breath. Around them, the rain fell heavily, washing away any sign of tire tracks. Yet it could not erase the truth of what was happening. Natalie's training kicked in. She remained outwardly compliant, all the while knowing that every syllable and every motion was being recorded on her device. This moment felt crucial, a turning point in a system that had long favored officers who abused the power they were sworn to uphold. In the darkness, with the glow of street lamps reflecting off rain-slicked asphalt, Natalie vowed that these recorded words and actions would one day shatter the facade of Maplewood PD's untouchable authority. By now, a small crowd had gathered under dripping awnings, their faces illuminated by the somber glow of street lamps. Among them stood Isabella Mitchell, a 10th grade English teacher in her late 40s, her white hair tucked behind one ear. She stepped forward, boldly holding her phone in plain sight. "Officer," she called out, voice steady despite the tension, "what do you plan to do here?" Caldwell turned abruptly, his expression hardening. "Step closer and I'll have you cuffed for interfering with police business," he growled, one hand resting on his holstered firearm. Yet Isabella did not waver. She held the phone higher, ensuring its camera captured every detail. Around her neighbors and passers-by, men in work boots, women clutching handbags, pulled out their phones and began recording, their lenses focused on the unfolding scene. Darkness seemed to thicken as two additional patrol cars swung in from side streets, their headlights cutting through the rain. The arrival of these vehicles sent a clear message. Internal cooperation within Maplewood PD was alive and well, with no officer daring to question their peers' conduct. Natalie recognized this as a symptom of a troubling culture. An unlawful traffic stop, 2, an unauthorized search, 3, excessive force used, 4, planted evidence, 5, disabled body cameras, 6, intimidation of witnesses, and 7, failure to advise of Miranda rights. Each transgression hung in her mind, indexed by her training and experience. Off to one side, a uniformed officer named Jamal Wilson, in his early 30s and relatively new to the department, lingered with the other bystanders. His posture was tense but curious, an internal conflict evident in his furrowed brow. In that moment, he made a choice he would not stand by. Wishing to remain anonymous to his fellow officers, he discreetly activated a small recorder concealed in his jacket pocket. As the rain thickened and the officers continued their charade, Jamal's device quietly captured every whispered insult, every planted bag, every false statement. Natalie saw the shift in his eyes, recognition, regret, and resolve intertwining. With Jamal's covert assistance and the bystanders' recordings, the balance of power was tilting. Under the shadow of Maplewood's glistening storefronts, she felt a surge of hope. This night would not end in silence. Instead, it would serve as the catalyst for revealing every wrongdoing hidden behind the blue badge. Officer Caldwell's voice cut through the tension. "We have ample reason to take you in." As they forced Natalie toward the patrol car, she steadied herself and announced clearly, "I am Special Agent Amara Johnson with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." A sarcastic smirk tugged at Caldwell's lips. "And I'm the director of the CIA." "Get in," he mocked. Natalie held her ground. "My credentials are in my inside jacket pocket. You should verify my identity before adding more charges." For a tense moment, Caldwell and Officer Rhodes glanced at each other, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Then Caldwell roughly extracted her wallet and opened it under the street lamp's glow. The gold FBI badge gleamed unmistakably. In that instant, Caldwell's face drained of color. His hand trembled as he called for assistance, stammering, "Sir, she really is FBI." Natalie raised her voice so the watching neighbors could hear. "Do not touch any vehicles or evidence until my team arrives." A ripple of applause echoed from the sidewalk. As Caldwell lowered his gaze in shame, Natalie felt the weight of authority shift away from those who once abused it. Agent Johnson sat in the Southport FBI interview room, her uniform jacket still damp with blood. Special Agent Director Marcus Thompson, age 50, and Natalie Wau's mentor for years entered and set 2 cups of coffee before her. Natalie began, her voice steady despite the lingering pain. "Deputy Chief Rhodes and his officers pulled me over. Without probable cause, searched my vehicle, without a warrant used excessive force, planted false evidence, disabled their body cameras, and threatened bystanders." Thompson nodded gravely. A technician handed over the extracted audio file from Natalie's phone, every whispered slur and staged moment recorded in her secret feed. "This is only the tip of the iceberg," Natalie concluded. Thompson tapped his finger on a stack of personnel records. "Let's review Caldwell's history." At 38, Caldwell had spent 12 years at Maplewood PD, and prior to that, 2 years at Montgomery County, where he was asked to resign after repeated excessive force complaints. Statistics show 84% of his arrests involve minorities, even though the county is only 22% non-white, Thompson observed. Together, they prepared to escalate the investigation. Together, Agent Thompson and Natalie had assembled a comprehensive task force to investigate allegations stretching back 5 years. They reached out to key witnesses, Michael Robinson, a 19-year-old college student who'd been falsely arrested; Darnell Washington, 46, a local business owner whose car was planted with drugs; and Tasha Williams, 44, an ER nurse who endured threats after refusing to stay silent. A pivotal break came from Officer Jamal Wilson, 30, an internal source who revealed that the Guardians, an informal clique within Maplewood PD, was protected at the highest levels. Chief William Parker, 52, routinely quashed complaints and shielded cadets from accountability. Local newspapers reacted predictably. The Riverdale Gazette labeled Natalie a zealous undercover agent, while the Southport Observer praised her as a crusader against systemic bias. Meanwhile, a secret meeting at Victor Harrington's 48 and a prominent real estate developer exposed financial arrangements tying Caldwell and Parker to Harrington's projects. Their plans systematically dismantle Natalie's credibility and reclaim control of the department. Unbeknownst to them, Natalie's counterintelligence measures had already set a trap. When federal authorities executed simultaneous raids, 17 individuals, officers, elected officials, and private associates were indicted. In the aftermath, Maplewood PD underwent a complete structural overhaul, ensuring no such network could ever flourish again. 1 year has passed since the watershed events that shook Maplewood to its core. The town center, once a place of silent unease, now hums with cautious optimism. Commander Natalie Brooks, promoted to Chief of Police shortly after Caldwell's arrest, has guided her department through a complete restructuring. On any given afternoon, you'll spot officers walking alongside residents in the newly established community outreach program. Black, white, Hispanic, and Asian faces mingle at neighborhood watch meetings. Everyone knows that public safety belongs to all of them. Crime statistics have fallen across the board, violent crime down by 28%, and citizen complaints about bias reduced by over 75%. The revival hasn't been effortless. Several former officers unwilling to embrace the new standards resigned or were dismissed. Their replacements, recruited from within Maplewood and neighboring jurisdictions, underwent rigorous training, emphasizing de-escalation and cultural awareness. The Maplewood City Council now includes 2 seats reserved for community advocates, positions that ensure local voices remain central to public safety decisions. Public forums on policing are held monthly in the town hall, where Chief Brooks listens as elders, teenagers, small business owners, and clergy share their concerns. Each forum ends with action items, A list of tangible steps. New crosswalks near school zones, expanded mental health resources for dispatchers, and expanded youth mentorship programs in partnership with the county sheriff's office. County Commissioner Hayes, once silent on racial disparities, now sponsors annual reports on police transparency. Mayor Phillips, who survived the political fallout by resigning gracefully in the aftermath, remains a respected elder stateswoman who mentors emerging leaders. Victor Harrington's real estate holdings were placed under court supervision. Several historically minority-owned neighborhoods have since seen reinvestment rather than displacement. In quiet moments, Natalie reflects on the cost of that fateful traffic stop. Her temple scar has faded to a pale mark, a reminder of both pain and purpose. Special Agent Hamilton, now director of the FBI's Regional Civil Rights Division, remains a close confidant, providing guidance whenever local jurisdiction meets federal lines. Officer Jamal Wilson, who once feared speaking out, now serves as Maplewood PD's Deputy Chief of Patrol, a testament to the power of conscience over complicity. Neighbors speak in even tones about how far Maplewood has come. Sidewalks once patrolled by suspicion are now shared spaces where families stroll at dusk. Shopkeepers greet officers by name. Faith leaders from every congregation collaborate on faith-based community initiatives that address substance abuse, mental health, and homelessness. In public schools, police in the classroom, events allow children to meet uniformed officers in a non-confrontational setting, building trust from an early age. Yet lingering challenges remain. A handful of Guardian sympathizers still operate quietly in surrounding counties, proof that corruption never vanishes overnight. The FBI's Justice Integrity Network, born from Natalie's Maplewood blueprint, continues investigating allied networks across multiple states. Occasionally, anonymous threats reach Natalie late at night, reminding her that vigilance is a lifelong commitment. 1 year later, Maplewood is no longer a town defined by its failures. Instead, it has become a model for how deep-seated injustice can be uprooted through relentless dedication, community partnership, and unflinching transparency. The scars, both personal and collective, serve not as wounds, but as markers of growth. While no one claims the journey is over, residents now share a quiet confidence when a community stands united against the misuse of power. The promise of equal justice need not remain a distant ideal. It can become reality. Note, this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.